This morning, we discussed a very important and pertinent question. Are our highways or roads safe in Malaysia for consumers to use? And today, we focus on the federal highway. There's been a lot of statements, comments made over the years, and I was one of those who have been always articulating the problems faced or people are facing on the federal highway. If you know your history, you will know that the Federal Highway was actually built in 1959. The objective of the building was to connect both um, Kuala Lumpur and, of course, Port Klang, because Port Klang was the port hub and activities was between these two destinations. That was in 1959, and over the years, there was more construction done, the widening of the roads. Eventually, the toll booths were put up, and eventually, the toll booths were taken away. Now, the issue we are going to discuss today is what a lot of people do not know. That is, when the federal highway was first built, and eventually when it was being administered, there was a particular law that was implemented, which is basically that the federal highway is solely for vehicles, not motorbikes. Let me say that again. It was only for vehicles. And motorbikes had their own separate lane in the periphery. Unfortunately, over the years, the federal highway has become the battleground not just for motorcycles, but it has become a battleground for vehicles, heavy vehicles, buses, and even some bicycles. And of late, it is intolerable to use the federal highway. And this is because the jams are just unbelievable. And in the past, when we used to pay toll, Malaysia became recognizable as a country where you pay toll basically to get into a jam, not to free yourself from the jam. That is the sad pandemic in this country, the sadness where you are paying to get into a jam. And over the years, we have had many, many complaints to the authorities, to the MHA, Malaysian Highway Authority, and the Ministry of Transport, the JPJ, the police. Unfortunately, this have not been addressed nor curtailed. Press statements are made that they will look into it, but who's looking into it? So this morning, the question is asked whether the federal highway of today is safe for consumers. I say this because there's not one day where that particular highway is not jammed. And with the jam that's taking place over the years, and today it's more complicated post-COVID. So as I said, post-COVID, the volume of traffic that has come into the federal highway is greater. And to compound the problem, you also have ambulances who are doing a duty. And the ambulances are also coming into the same catchment. And what makes it even worse is because 2 lanes have become 3, 3 lanes have become 4, 4 lanes have become 5. And to complete and further complicate the matter, you have VVIPs and politicians and ministers with outriders coming into the same catchment, where they force the other road users to move to the right or to the left. Where do they move to? There are many cars or vehicles that were damaged. And sometimes this whole experience is a traumatic experience. This is why this morning I'm appealing to the government, I'm appealing to the Minister of Transport, the Minister of Home Affairs to set up a task force and for us to relook at who can use outriders, where can they use outriders, and what situation warrants the outrider, and in particular, who is monitoring the usage of outriders, and in which area, in which highways, in which roads, and whether that particular roads are conducive for outriders to come in without causing problems for other road users. I know this is a very controversial issue. People can make it even more controversial, but the silent majority are screaming, and the feedbacks we are getting is going to become more difficult, more jammed, and if this is not addressed speedily, then we have a problem. Now, what is the solution? I've always said that the solution is always that we have to introduce for the ambulances to move away from the ambulances and to have helicopters as ambulances to move from point A to point B. And I appeal to our VVIP, the rich and the famous. I'm sure they can afford to buy helicopters. They can have helipads in their homes, and they can move from point A to point B without causing problems for the ordinary folks like you and I, who are using the ordinary highways, paying tolls for it, and being forced aside when these outriders come in with their sirens and horning and shooing like as though we are animals in a farmland. Now, this is very unfortunate. If you look at other neighboring countries, for example, Singapore, Korea, Japan, even Thailand, even Indonesia for that matter, you will find that this has been weeded out. And unless it is pertinent, important, then outriders come into the scene, without which the ordinary highways are left. And if they're using the highways, these VVIPs, they will have to behave like everybody else, take their turn and get involved in the jam, or get up earlier to go from point A or point B. They cannot use the official work excuse anymore. And why do I say that? Because the jams are not going to go away. The volume of vehicles using our highway is not going to decrease. It's going to get worse, and it's going to get more intolerable. And in the past, there have been netizens who have been violent, who have been angry, who have also been penalized by the law because they have become more vocal when they were forced to go right or left, when outriders or when there was a massive jam or an accident. Now, this is why this morning, because Malaysia is a parliamentary democracy, there is freedom of speech, and sometimes whistleblowers and others like me, who is the leading consumer advocate in Malaysia and also in ASEAN and APEC, if I don't voice out these grievances that come to me, to the government, then who's going to voice out? So this morning, I pray that the government who's listening, who's a caring government, will listen and come up with new protocols. How to handle the federal highway. I think the first thing that we need to do is we need to implement protocols where motorbikes and those who are in the gig economy, I'm talking about the Grab motorcyclists, do not use the federal highway because they have their designated lane, motorcycle lane already. And who's going to enforce it? The police has to enforce this. The traffic police has to enforce this. Because right now, one of the biggest dangers on federal highway is coming from motorbikes and heavy vehicles, super heavy vehicles, sometimes in the speed lane or the lane next to it. What's the use of responding when someone dies or when there's a fatality? And I've always said this, Malaysia has got one of the highest fatalities on our highways and our roads compared to other ASEAN countries, despite our lower population. Now, if something has to be done, I always say this. I've said this to my friends. I've said this to my loved ones. If something has to be done, it has to be done now. You cannot push it away. And that's how I have always operated. If something has to be said, it has to be said now. If something has to be initiated, it must be initiated now, before fatalities, before issues come up. And I pray this morning that this particular recording will go viral and it will get the blessings of many people, and the authorities will act to make certain that our premier, our old, recognized federal highway, which was built in 1959, will become again a safe highway. Thank you. Have a nice week.